Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Tara, and we are going to talk about Our Boys, Season 1, Episode 4. And it's not Season 1, it's a mini-series. I do this every time. But yeah, it's called The Dawn Martyr, and full spoilers for the episode, as always. So this episode dove deeper into the investigation. Now that they've got a sort of target, they've got, they found the car. They're not necessarily convinced exactly who is involved to begin with, although Uncle Yosef's looking pretty implicated by the end of the episode, from their point of view. And they've tapped their phones, they're listening to the conversations, they're doing all this stuff. And meanwhile, Hussein has a difficult time bringing Mohammed's body back home. And we'll get into that because it was very difficult. Also, just a quick correction we had a couple of episodes ago, which we didn't. We literally got this correction on episode 2. The night we were recording episode 3, and that was that the station, the unit that Simon's in is actually, it was compared to like their FBI essentially, rather than
which is something we probably should have figured out.
Yeah, but rather than the actual sort of regular police force, it's more of their version of the FBI. So I was going to ask Tara what she thought of the episode at the end of that sentence, but she picked the perfect moment to leave the chair. So I'm left here with no idea what I'm doing, and just saying hi to Tara's dog who's in the background. Hey Foxy. Tara's back. Hey Tara, what did you think of the episode?
Yeah, it's a pretty good episode. It's not as intense as like the second episode.
Episode 2 is still the high bar.
That one was
still the bar.
Yeah, that was a pretty high bar though. But I'm like really invested in everybody now. So like as we're just learning more and more details, I'm still engaged like every single time I watch the show. Like I think it's really good. And I think this one is on par with the last one.
It's a shame that is going kind of unnoticed just because it's not in English, but by a lot of, the Western world.
Yeah, I agree, because the acting is superb, and the way that it's shot and the direction is really great. I agree. I don't know anyone who's watching it other than us.
Yeah, it's sure, and obviously people who comment on our reviews, but I think one of the things that comes up with foreign shows actually sometimes is, because we've had this in the past when me and Connor did some shows on Netflix, is that we think the acting's great because there's one element of it that we don't get because we're not speaking the language, but like some native speakers of whatever it was, I think in the case of Dark it was German. I don't think Dark was definitely in German. I mean, I think that show was one of the shows that I'm referring to. Like some German people would be like, oh, I mean the acting's a little bit over the top though, and to us we couldn't see that because we don't know, we don't know how the words.
Hussein, I don't think he's over the top. I think he is.
Oh sure. Phenomenal. Oh no, I agree with you. I think the acting in this is great, but I'm wondering if people who are native, who speak those languages, are noticing maybe some pieces of the acting that aren't sticking out to us in a way. But to answer your question, because you did ask me one, I liked episode 2. It's as we get deeper into it, and as your cat gets deeper and deeper into that door frame, we're getting a lot more of Avishay, who I think is really interesting that they chose to like basically have him gone for 2 whole episodes. We just kind of saw him peek back in at the end, the last episode, implicating him to us that he is part of the group that are responsible for this. But it's not outright answered for us, even by the end of this episode, if he is one of the culprits. We know 2 of the younger boys who are with this uncle, because we know that there's 2 young people, and the uncle's probably the driver, and that's who's behind this. But Avishay, we basically start with him in this episode where he is feeling very out of it. He's very off. He's he has this moment with his parents where he's like, his dad says, "Oh, how are you feeling? Are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, do I not look fine? Why are you asking me that? Why are you asking if I don't?" And it's this really awkward, like almost, I don't want to quite say sociopath, but like just the way he responds to this normal question that
it's very accusatory. I thought maybe I missed something in the previous episode that they had like hostility toward each other.
Yeah, he comes off as just being really out of it, and he goes to a therapy session, which actually wasn't 100% clear to me exactly. That's what it exactly was until later when we met her through Simon, and actually, okay, she's a therapist, and that's what she was doing exactly. Because I thought it might be like Because there was a lot of talk about him going back to the school, and I thought this might be like his like guidance counselor or something at school or something like that.
Well,
But
I sort of got right away that he was severely depressed and is
mm,
going through something real bad, or like I mean, even that whole altercation he had with his family member could have been like just the depression coming through as anxiety. Like he seems to be emotionally just not stable right now. And so once she started talking in a calm way that was just breaking things down
no,
logically,
you're right.
I think I was like, oh yeah, it's probably a therapist.
Because he has that moment as well when he's getting on the bus where he like just the bus driver gets angry. He's like, "Hurry up and get on if you're coming on. Stop staring." This.
Yeah, this is a big decision for him. It's like a life-changing moment, and he decides not to go through with it. That's also part of the therapy session where she's like, uh, where she says this is the drawing that she does. So you were at the bus station, and then you were overwhelmed with anxiety. It was at 100%, and he was like, also, she was like reading his diary or journal about basically an apology letter to his parents.
Yeah, but not going back to the school. It doesn't necessarily sound like the door's closed on it. It sounds like he could still make the choice to go back. It doesn't sound like,
Yeah.
like it was a do or die right now moment, even though he was kind of treating it that way. It feels like he could just go back. Do you know what this has reminded me of, bizarrely? And I'm trying to remember what show it is, but there's a sitcom with a character who got... Oh, it's The Good Place. Chidi in The Good Place is terrible at choices. If he's just asked what type of ice cream he wants, he'll just stand there and won't be able to choose. There's the thought Avishay
like
staring at the bus reminded me of that.
Okay, yeah.
Less funny, of course. This is played much more serious, and he's a disturbed individual. Whereas Chidi's very light and funny, and it's like, haha, isn't he crazy? Avishay might have burned someone alive.
It's more of like a situational thing though, where like he seems like the perfect person, but he has this one flaw, and that one flaw is so irritating to everybody around him.
Oh yeah. I have lots of those for everyone around me.
I bet.
What's that? You're not supposed to agree with that so quickly. What?
Oh, yeah. I wonder if that's the case.
You had two options. You had two options there. You said, no, you're not irritating to people around you, which would have been fine. Or, yeah, I think I've got a lot too. But no, you chose the one that's like, no, yeah, you're messed up. Yeah.
I gotta like get out of this situation real quick.
Was that a comedy get up, or was the cat actually making noise and this was just the opportune moment for the get out of the chair? It was a cat. Okay, we have cat. She brought proof. Tara didn't think I'd believe her, so she brought the proof.
Here.
Hi, Gus K.
Got the window, Gus. Be distracted by lights.
So.
Oh, dude, he's been a real asshole the last couple of days.
Yes, I was getting lots of horror stories before we started recording about Gus. He's legitimately whipping her in the face with a tail right now. For the audio listeners,
I would just leave the door open, but I have a roommate who needs to sleep, and
yes.
So I have to respond right away when he's making noise.
It's fine. The audience will get used to
relaxing.
The cat. Not controversy. The cat. There's a phrase that we can come up with for this. We can name Gussie's transgressions. But where were we? So Avishay is very interesting in this episode because by the end of it, I don't think we genuinely know if he was involved or not. Like, in the one hand, he could be feeling what he's feeling right now because he was involved in this and he witnessed this and maybe feels guilty, or doesn't know what to feel, or it could be separate and he could just be feeling this because of everything in his life.
Sure, like he's going through a big ordeal right now, but to be honest, I kind of have some doubts about the other people too, who are supposedly involved.
Well, the only person I think that we are supposed to directly think is involved right now is the uncle, Yosef.
Right, but I mean, so Simon, has permission to arrest him because he has something that could be interpreted as a confession over audio, still says, I need time to think about it. And we are meant to understand his character.
Oh, sure.
As somebody who hasn't been wrong yet. So the fact that he's hesitating makes me hesitate.
Oh yeah, I don't necessarily think it's definitely him, but I think the episode is clearly wanting us to think that he's the prime suspect up until now.
Sure, and he was up until Simon said, "I need time
So
to
Simon's
think about this because something's wrong."
so Simon's saying that for you just immediately rules him out as the prime suspect.
Well, maybe. I mean, so far he hasn't been wrong, and he's meant to be our like. He's clearly the smartest guy in the room.
Well,
You know?
I mean, it's worth mentioning that while he is the one who uses the car, there is no footage of him tying him to that night. You know, that's why they assume he must be the driver, if he is indeed involved and he's there. And obviously, they're painting this picture of like having two younger guys with him. So it's like, yeah, he has all these nephews that he hangs around with, and you know that was one of the first things we saw in episode 1 was him picking up Avishay and some of his friends or cousins, whoever they were. I think they were all cousins. I think they were all related because
Yeah, they all just seem like a group of friends who just hang out every night.
yeah, well, but I think the way they talked about him in this episode is that he does have like a set of nephews that he always hangs around. So I think they might have all been cousins. I think 2 of them are brothers. They said because they get the family tree up at one point and they're like, look at all these kids. There's literally like, you know, the rabbis had like 6 kids and they've all had like 5 kids each, and it's just this wall of people.
And they call them a clan. Like there's so many of them, and they all just hang out together. And apparently they all share the same therapist.
Yeah, because it's Yusuf's therapist. That's why Simon goes to see the therapist. He gets a warrant to go and speak to her, and asks her about him. And he has a warrant, so she has to give him some things. Like she has to sort of, you know, as he had violent sort of thoughts recently. You know, what does he talk about in relation to the crime? Because Simon actually gets honest with her to a point, maybe more than he needs to, that his job dictates. Maybe he goes one step beyond because he actually tells her, no, he's a suspect in the killing of Muhammad. Like
yeah,
that.
he says he's the prime suspect. That's why we need to know.
And this kind of shakes her to her core, and she actually avoids taking a call from Yusuf later, but does take a call from Avishay. And because at one point, when she mentions to Simon that she does see some of the nephews, he says, "Oh, who are they?" And she's like, "Your warrant doesn't cover that information. I don't have to tell you that. They're still protected until you get more warrants." So she's still been very, protective of her job and her oath that she's taken. But she does hesitate to speak to Yusuf. But she does speak to Avishay at the end of the episode, and he needs like immediate like help because he's starting to. I don't know if I'd quite say have a panic attack, but he's starting to buckle. And she's like, "You've not been taking your pills. You need more pills. I'll give you a new prescription. You know, breathe." And she talks him through it.
Yeah, because Avishay's stutter apparently comes back, and that's like the first sign that he hasn't been taking his medication, and he doesn't seem to care that he's not taking it.
Yeah, well, because the big scene we've not talked about is when they're listening in on Yosef and Avishay and the others, they go to the rabbi's house, which is Avishay's grandfather, and Yosef's brought him this comfy recliner. He's like, "This is good for your back," and it's basically like he's kind of the the loser child who is not as on the up and up as he would be like, and he's not proud of his son, and his son's trying to buy him off with gifts, but all he's thinking is like, "How did you pay for this? I don't trust where you got the money from this." He's belittling him, but at the same time, from what we've seen of Yosef, it's like, yeah, he has that kind of sleazy vibe about him. So
He does, and he always hangs out with people who are younger than him because there's like an automatic reverence that you get for just being like older than all your friends and stuff, and like he's significantly older, I guess, if he's a uncle.
Is that why you hang out with me?
I knew you were gonna go there. And yes.
Do you think I give you respect?
You better.
Yes, I do. Please don't end the show.
I'll buy you something pretty.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. No, I think this scene was very telling because I think we stayed away from these characters for a couple of episodes for the most part, and seeing the grandfather, the rabbi, get very upset with Avishay for not being able to recite something from the Torah. He gets very upset at him, and he's like, "Yeah, it's because it's something you've not done in a long time, so you've forgotten how to do it. You think you should be able to, but you're hesitating, you can't." And he sees it as this crisis of faith. This you have to go back and get to your studies. When obviously we are talking about him needing medication and other reasons, but he's told to go and speak to his grandmother who's very sick. And he goes in and speaks to her, but so does Yosef. And Yosef decides to tell her about some things because she is still hoping that the Arab teenagers who were kidnapped and killed will still turn up alive. She's still praying for their return.
You mean the Jewish ones?
So sorry, yes, the Jewish kids. Sorry, yeah. She's still praying for their return, and Yosef not only informs her that they're dead, he also, this is where he says the thing that Simon and the others are like, this is very implicit what he's saying here. He says, something's already happened and other things will be happening soon, something to that effect, where he's almost,
and you'll be proud of me,
which makes it sound like he is responsible for what he's talking about, and the way he's talking does sound like it could be referring to the murder of Muhammad. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So, and of course the others all want to jump in, and as you said, Simon's very hesitant. It's funny because I didn't necessarily read that his reaction is not thinking it's him, although I definitely see why you're saying that, and I can see that being the case, like, getting a swerve where he's not actually involved.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just like his partner who's like the really good-looking guy that's there. I don't know his name, but he kind of reminds me of Scott Eastwood. He's a very handsome man.
The tall, skinny guy.
Yeah,
Okay.
who's been like with him on this case, and
I love how you said the good-looking guy, as if that would narrow it down for me in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, come on. The man is so good looking. Well, and then his boss, who's above him, who doesn't, or I assume it's his boss, the one that he needs to get permission from in order to arrest anybody, is even he gives him the go ahead. Like, okay, like, this is enough. This is enough for at least an arrest.
Well, that was actually one of the scenes that we should mention. Is it's the DA or whoever is there and tells his boss under no circumstances, like, do not arrest someone until you're 100% sure, because the media, or not the media, but just the backlash in general is going to be huge. So until you're positive that the culprit is the correct one, do not even arrest anyone. So the fact that they're all sort of gung-ho about it, it's kind of almost going against that, because it's not. I don't know if it's enough to really be sure that you're going to put him away, because at this point it's still going to be
it's enough for at least an arrest and an interrogation.
Yeah, but what I was getting from the DAs though is that until you're sure it's going to be the person who turns out that you can convict, do not do it. Because right now I don't think they do have enough to convict him. They have enough to come in and talk to him, but the way he made it sound to me is like, no, unless you're sure you've got him nailed, you do not bring him in.
Right.
Because once they do those
they seem to be convinced that it's at least enough. So
yeah,
everyone but Simon now. So it makes me like unsure about maybe this is
but Simon,
because I have no idea what the true story is. So I've been following these kids thinking, oh, these are going to be the bad guys, but maybe something bad happens to them. Like, who knows?
Oh, maybe, yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely a reason why we're following these kids, and Avishay specifically. He's definitely going to play into it in a big way. One way would be that he's part of the culprits, but another way would be that he ends up being another casualty once the backlash happens. Or like
falsely accused or something.
Or possibly,
because of retribution. Who knows? Like,
yeah, there's options.
Especially with this mob that's forming.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute, but I think we should mention that Simon goes undercover, essentially, at the end of the episode, because all the episodes build up to Sabbath, because there's a couple of scenes where they're talking about it, and because there's one scene where the good-looking guy wants to go and arrest them because they're in like a pool, and it's like, oh hey, they're away from everyone else. This would be a really quiet arrest. No one would see us. We can swoop in and do this. And Sam's no. Give me permission to go in. I can get into where they're celebrating the Sabbath and get kind of close to them. Presumably, I think it's through his brother who we saw before. And there's actually, because there's a fun scene where he's getting shit for putting his mother in a rest home, and he steals the yarmulke and says, "I'm not giving it back. I need it," and just leaves with his yarmulke. But yeah, so that's the end of the episode, is that we see them all celebrating. This is right after Avishay's had his phone conversation with the therapist, or soon after, at least, right after the sense of us watching the show. And we just get this reveal at the end when they all turn around. At the front is Simon. He's there. He's got in close.
This is the same as, what's his name? The other rabbi who's like the head guy of the of Avishai's family,
Oh, sure,
Avishai's
yeah.
family, which we saw in I think the last episode that they were that his brother was also in the same temple or something.
Yeah, Ben David.
Ben David, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so, no, I mean, obviously that's the exciting ending that he's getting closer. Probably not as great a cliffhanger as last episode, but it's certainly very solid, and it makes me curious because it means next episode we're going to get him interacting with some of these characters, and
Hmm.
I'll be curious to see what he gets out of them. Because we've seen him kind of do it before, where he's been up to like a group of people and just kind of pretended to not be a cop, and you know,
Yeah, that was a really good scene. That was a really fun scene.
yeah. So I'll be curious to see him do that now with these characters that we know a bit better, that we understand a bit better because we've seen more of them. Even though there's obviously still the mystery that because they're very intentionally not giving us the information. Are they the culprits or not? Like
Hmm.
that's deliberately not been something we've been given so that we can speculate along with them. But we do get a lot of them and get a sense of character. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out. Hussein has a bit of a rough day. Where he's escorted in a couple of ambulances to go and retrieve the body from the police, and he's asked to adhere to a few requests. Otherwise, he will not be given his son's body, and that is to have the burial, the funeral take place in a certain location because it'll be too dangerous to go through their home territory,
Hmm.
and also it has to be during the day. And there's some arguing with this, and obviously.
Well, yeah, with the crowd out there. I mean,
Mm,
like I was on the guy's side, but I mean, still, the man is going through so much. Like to just ask him to. It did seem kind of cruel, all the requests that he was making.
It did. The funny thing is though, is that ultimately Hussein
And he's right.
gets his way. He gets his way and he gets the body. And when they're driving back, even though he's agreed to have the funeral there, it doesn't really matter because when they're driving back, the mob, because we see the mob when they're leaving to come get the body, where they're all kind of like shouting the martyr, or whatever in the window.
Hmm.
And when he's coming back, I felt really bad for Hussein because this mob, who are supposed to be like his people, supposed to be on his side, basically say his feelings don't matter because he's our martyr now, and
Yeah.
they smash the windows out of the ambulance and take the body and start carrying it to the streets, like up in the air and chanting and singing and all else, and it's really quite sad.
Hmm.
Like Hussein just loses control and he's begging for them to calm down and begging for them not to do this. And the one bit of credit to him, of course, is that when they're marching somewhere, and I don't know the locations well enough to name them, but they're marching somewhere that's going to be worse, that's going to be dangerous, that might start something. And Hussein actually changes the chant, which convinces them to go in a different direction.
Yeah.
Um,
Like let the martyr unite Palestine
yeah, yeah,
instead
yeah.
of like praise Allah and the what
It,
they were saying before.
Yeah, because it felt like they were going to war before, essentially,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term, and he kind of convinced them, no, let's go and celebrate them in our home.
Yeah, let's do this peaceful thing instead. And it
Yeah.
works. Like the chant catches on and there is a burial, although it's not where he wanted it to be originally.
Hmm. Yeah. And there's a couple of little scenes with the wife and the other son, and them kind of being emotional with each other, and uh,
Yeah, the wife has gone totally catatonic.
yeah, she is not functioning at all. The son, when he's at the funeral and Hussein looks at him, and he's still very beaten up from the riots and whatnot. The whole thing is very, very dour. And again, go back to the argument with the police officer. It's like, yeah, everything he's asking seems unreasonable and seems cruel, but ultimately he's proven right by what this
Yeah.
mob does. And Hussein is able to kind of redirect them so he doesn't completely. But there was a moment there where, like, I think Hussein's scenes are some of the best scenes in the show. I mean, nothing's
Oh,
topped.
absolutely.
I mean
I'm
that.
totally like riveted every time he's on screen. Like just watching his reactions to things or the decisions he makes, like to send his brother to go identify the body, like can't
Mm.
help but like just feel like crushed.
Oh,
Like
absolutely. Every him reacting to anything. Obviously, nothing tops that opening like 10, 15 minutes of episode 2. That was just
right.
phenomenal. But even here, there's a moment in the ambulance where they're starting to get really kind of volatile outside, and they start smashing the windows, and he's just kind of begging them that, again, putting us in this POV of him, like where we're feeling what he's feeling,
Yeah.
made this really extremely tense and extremely kind of. It almost felt like when you have like a nightmare, and it feels like no matter what you do, you can't win or beat the nightmare.
Yeah.
That's what this moment felt like. It felt like no matter what he did, he was begging and pleading, but no matter what he did, it was inevitable that they were going to get the body.
Right. I mean, at first he was in he insisted on being in the same ambulance with his son, and he turned the rear view mirror so that he wouldn't have to see the body in the back, even though the body was covered. And then all of a sudden he's back there like holding on to his son for dear life, like trying to pull him back into the ambulance, and the crowd has just taken him.
Yeah, and at one point does this crowd think that playing tug of war with the deceased father with his body is poor taste or something that we shouldn't be doing? It's just no. At this point, it's not about him as a person. And I think that's the beautiful thing about this plotline, is that Hussein should be angrier than anyone. He should be the most upset. He should, equally with his wife, I suppose, and his other son. But he should be angrier than this mob. This mob, sure, they should be upset, but this is his son. He should be the one who's livid.
He's lost a child. Yeah, and this whole symbol of his son has become bigger than anything that he can. He doesn't even have a moment to grieve because his son's taken away and become this symbol now.
Yeah, and it's this personal thing, and that's
it doesn't belong to him anymore.
Yeah, the mob
even the funeral had so many people there, and they're not there to grieve for Muhammad like his family is. They feel like they're just there. I don't know, like it's not personal anymore.
Yeah, it's like they've taken this away from his family. They've taken the act of grieving away from them, and it's an interesting dynamic for Hussein, because he is obviously very devout with his people. Everything I've seen with them, he is, it's not like he's ostracized in his community. He is part of his community. But he doesn't want this violence. He's trying to like sort of speak out against it, but he can't be heard. He literally can't be heard begging for it to stop, because they're so loud. It's this idea of the personal attachment and meaning of what's actually happened. The important part in a dark situation like this is being completely just washed away by the sound of the angry mob who have taken it and politicized it and made it theirs. Mm-hmm. And it's the idea that even his side, his culture, his religion, his people are not really respecting what's important for him or his family. They're just making it about them. So
yeah, very emotional scene too, the scene where he's with, I don't know, something about like knowing that his son was in that like piece of shit car that was driving up instead of something like more respectful, and like having to hide everything that's going on. Like it was an emotional scene for me to watch, because I know this father is going through so much grief, and he like we've already discussed, like it's almost like he's forced into just, I don't know, like it. I don't know if he can even get closure from this because it's not personal anymore, or that he's forced into like closure too soon because of it.
Yeah. It's almost at that moment where he does convince them to turn around and do something more peaceful, even though it's not the burial he wanted for his son. It almost feels like... At least
he had control for a second.
For a second he got control, but he does have this bittersweet sort of like, he just has to concede that if he's going to get anything done, it has to be something that appeases the crowd. Again, it's not thinking about himself. He's having to like do something that will work for the angry mob. So again, his grief has been robbed from him, and it's kind of heartbreaking, and it's showing what these types of situations can do to people actually stuck in the middle of them. And I think it's interesting to see, like, is there a point where he does become angry and wants to be in the mob, or is he always going to feel like they're separate from him because they've taken this private thing away from him, this personal, part of his life that's this is this will be the darkest period of his entire life, for however long he lives.
I don't know, like he's not at the point of anger. He's still grieving, but now that his son is buried, maybe he'll start to get angry and become part of the mob. But he seems to always be in control. Like he's got a lot of discipline.
I'm not expecting. I wouldn't blame him if he did, but I'm not expecting. I think the more interesting thing to do with his character almost is that he is always kind of on the outside of what this mob is. Because it's more interesting.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I hope that he's, responsible for bringing something good out of it, but because I really like his character, and I want something good to happen because of this. But
And I think there's maybe a thing you could mention here with his age, just because like a lot of the mob does seem to be skewed younger, and I think it's interesting that his other son did become part of the mob immediately. Like that was like the first thing he did, and he's almost had an arc in the background where after like being hurt extremely and almost arrested and everything else, where the grief finally hit him after that. Whereas Hussein, maybe being more of an adult and more experienced, skipped over the immature anger part of it. And again, not that I necessarily don't sympathize with how his brother feels, but the idea that he kept a clearer head even in this, turmoil, throughout this tragedy. Obviously, his emotions were like going through the roof, but he was able to not.
Even the guy who's always with him, that seems to be his age, seems to be on the mob side for a lot of it. Like he keeps telling him to be angry, like get what you want because this is still about you and your family.
But the point of the show, as we've said since the start, is about, let's not just get angry, like that, because that's what causes conflict. That's unnecessary, and
let's not do what everybody else wants us to do. Yeah. Let's take a step back and really,
I would never have predicted this from episode 1, right? Obviously, episode 2 made it very clear, but episode 1, I would never have predicted that Hussein was going to be the heart of this show.
No, me neither. But well done.
Yes, well done.
I'm really into it.
Yeah. So no. Yeah. I mean, I suppose if you're going to analyze the show in that sense, you'd say Hussein's the heart and Simon's the mind. And heart and mind is what you need.
Yeah, I guess Simon is the like connective tissue for everything.
Yeah.
I wonder if his character is made up, since he seems to be like conveniently located in all the places.
Yeah, I wouldn't surprise me. They said they made up a number of characters, so yeah, I'm not sure. I'm sure we could just look it up and find out who's I don't
want to find out what happens.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to know what the end of the story is. Yeah, we'll find out at the end. We'll discover at the end. But that was episode 4. Was there anything I glossed over or missed that you wanted to talk about? Any little scenes?
I don't think so. I think we covered everything. We talked about the good-looking guy. That was priority number 1 for me. So.
Yes. Keep that in mind for future reviews. That is episode 4 of Our Boys, though. So by all means, let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments, like and subscribe, all the usual things. All those things do help us, as does, of course, going to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, where they can do what, Tara?
Oh, I thought you were going to keep going there. Well, you can donate as low as $1 per month, and that gets you access to a lot of our reviews that we do early, like our Twilight Zone reviews, or the Star Trek show that you do with Connor. You'll also get bonus episodes of shows we do. Helps us out. Check it out.
Yeah. What else can you do to help us?
You can rate the podcast if you're listening.
Whoa, I did not expect you to get the one thing I didn't say yet. Because I've never asked you to do that one before. I'm impressed. You can finish, but I'm impressed. That's why I'm impressed.
Yeah, if you're listening to the audio version of the show, just go to your podcaster of choice and give us 5 stars. That always helps. If you want to give anything lower than 5 stars, then don't do that, because that also helps.
Yeah, don't bother. Yeah. But yeah, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?